Yeah, that's fine.
Is that he's a member of the artist group Swap Space and the network of uncollectible artists. His activities to create a dynamic social criticism resulting in site-specific project interventions. Now, the title of this talk is fantastic. It's Weed Gathering, Ethnobotanical Practices in the Cosmopolitan.
This is not a presentation on findings, rather an uncovering of questions. This investigation in progress is the outcome of a personal artistic journey. According to Cotton, in Ethnobotany Principles and Applications, ethnobotany is considered to encompass all studies which concern the mutual relationship between plants and traditional people. Through my creative practice, I document and analyze the possibilities and restrictions faced by various ethnic groups in Australia practicing an important and ancestral relationship with the environment. This paper will present the Weedy Connection Project, an online resource aimed at showcasing non-native plants in a new light, opening up new interaction with the Australian environment. I've always been interested in weeds for different reasons in different places. I was born and grew up in a dairy farm in northern Italy, and together with the stock we also managed several acres of pastures for internal uses, corn and wheat for internal uses and external sales, and poplars for sales to the timber industry. We had pigs, goats, dairy cows and meat bulls, a vegetable patch and a small orchard. I've been aware of the concept of weeds since a very tender age, when my parents used to send me off to the orchards and clean the good species out of the bad ones. Back then I knew already that the concept of weeds is a construct out of invested interest. The nature doesn't distinguish between good or bad species, we humans do. For a myriad of different reasons, but all of them concerned and centered to our human benefit. When I moved to Australia, I worked in orchards for years, then garden centres, now art centres. I was amazed when I came into contact with Agriculture Australia to learn about the legal restraint imposed on botanical species. Here in Australia, there is an act of government, the Noxious Weed Act 1993, a national piece of legislation which dictates which plants are allowed or not to live in this country. It goes much further. The Act provides for a special branch of the law administered by the Department of Agriculture and Primary Industries, which legislates each non-native plant in this country and the number of natives too. The legislation informs a special task force of law enforcers who go around far and wide giving $200 on the spot fine for anybody found guilty to not repressing the particular species according to the guidelines from the Noxious Weed Act 1993. A $200 on the spot fine to the farmer who doesn't destroy a bush of blackberry down the creek, or $200 on the spot fine to the orchardist who doesn't make sure the willow down in the paddock is prevented from fruiting and flowering. Now, this is happening in a continent where most of biodiversity is being affected irreversibly by human intervention. David Cole, the biologist, says all wilderness ecosystems would be artificial constructs to some extent, conscious reconstructions of what humans think is natural. This is also happening in a continent where most of the environmental knowledge is lost forever. With the loss of Aboriginal languages and cultures for 2 centuries of genocidal practice, we now have a social makeup on this continent that has minimal, if not nil, direct interaction with the environment. I am not talking about farmers with cattle and sheep, or orchardists with apples, mangoes, or the newly discovered olives. Those are sectors of our economy aimed at using the land until there is no use anymore. See wood chipping industry or cotton industry as examples. I am talking about the old person who takes the grandchildren down the creek and shows the young listener how to collect, store and prepare the particular plants to help his sore knee. I'm talking about an overall sentiment of belonging and placement within nature. How many of us know how to alleviate a headache without resorting to Panadol? The sentiment of a new awareness towards nature is echoed across several disciplines and social practices, like the 100 Miles Diet movement, which originated in Canada from a couple of environmental activists, Alyssa Smith and James McKinnon. The 100 Miles Diet restricts followers to provide for themselves within a specific geographical delimitation. The commercial statement has its roots in contesting the globalized economy system, which relies on fossil fuel transport at a great expense to the environment, in order to shift primary produce from one side to the global to another in several loops before it reaches the end user. I argue that in a cosmopolitan society, this tied back to the purpose of the conference, in a cosmopolitan society, civil or not, the constant shift of cultures transplanting and reassessing themselves in alien environments, social and botanicals, foster a disconnection to local ecosystems. This sentiment is mirrored also in a preamble by a university experimental degree offered at the University of Western Sydney, Oxford, social ecology. The guiding principle, as emphasized by Mara Bookings, were unity and diversity and complexity, spontaneity, complementary and mutualistic rather than hierarchical relationships, active participatory democracy and bioregionalism. Now, the founding chair of social ecology, Stuart B. Hill, suggests the work of various academics and social educators like Graham L. Smith. Graham teaches a program designed to reawaken the deep connection which he believes exists between humanity and nature. We are essentially calling forward something innate in every person. So, the next example is Peter Andrews in the Hunter Valley, very local guy. He grew up in a farm in Broken Hill and learned how to read the environment and the land from his father as a horse breeder and from the Aboriginal people of the Broken Hill area. He brings forward a whole new argument of how to read nature, how to use the nature in a way that is not anymore focused on producing, but focused on healing the land. The principle on natural sequence farmers, I just read briefly. Peter Andrews has found that every plant labeled as weeds can serve as pioneering species, inhibiting nutrients and soil erosion. They collect and supply essential substances for environmental health. Once fertility is built up and weeds are replaced naturally by palatable grasses. Now, the principle of natural sequence farming are complex and holistic above all beyond what I'm presenting today. There is a website, nsfarming.com. My argument just centered on the denial of cultural interaction. I grew up in a country where come spring, you get out and collect dandelions and wild asparagus as a seasonal treat. Here in Australia, I am denied the right to teach my daughters what a dandelion or the wild asparagus looks like. By law, I am obliged to suppress and prevent from fruiting the plant. Mushroom picking is a popular seasonal activity for many European cultures. I can speak from my Italian background experience, but other cultures, groups such as Macedonians, Russian, ex-Yugoslavian, Polish, do just have a very entrained connection with the activity. There is a fantastic essay about the cultural relationship Polish community have with the Belanglo forest, an hour and a half southwest of Sydney, which Camp Sister bus loads of people goes down to the state forest to collect mushrooms. Currently, ethnic minority groups, whether Poles, Macedonian, Vietnamese, Lebanese, Greeks or others, do get out and about just like all other Australians, at least occasionally, leaving the cities for recreational purpose. It's just that the place they like to visit and the way they view and use such places may significantly different from the Anglo-Celtic norm. In an exponentially cosmopolitan society like Australia, different kind of culturally driven interaction with the environment should be fostered as rife symbiosis. With all of this research in mind, I present my artistic argument. In the past years, I set up audio and self-guided, this goes again. I set up audio and self-guided tools of various environments as part of culture shows and residency, because art is my environment. That's where I bring forward my argument. I employ botanical species to metaphorically dispute the understanding of multiculturalism within the context of the Australian population, the plurality of cultures and genetic background, and the context of and stories. Within a socio-ecological argument, I acknowledge the various differences of costumes and customs which exist in our culturally diverse environment and highlight the traditional connection with introduced species. I would argue that the concept of civil society should be embraced also in awareness of bioregionalism, acknowledging our very neighborhood as ecosystem. There was a talk this morning that said humanity first. I would say bioregions before humanity, before society. We have to, in terms of cosmopolitanism then, attentive considering should be given in a multifaceted reality of personal and group interaction with the ecosystem. If civil society are understood as conglomerates of voluntary civic organization and institution, then I argue it should also acknowledge the environment in the equation. We live in a biosphere before a society. Thank you for letting me say that.